Black smoke sealed the 41st floor. Fire crawled the glass walls like a hungry thing. Trapped in the executive conference room, Grace Holloway, a CEO who had never broken in front of anyone, gripped the table's edge and wept when the glass began to crack. Out in the corridor, through screaming alarms and the stampede of people fleeing, Vincent Hale, a single father who had just been thrown out of the VIP elevator by security, raised a steel rescue bar, shattered the load-bearing glass, walked through the fire, and became the only man who didn't leave her behind. But why would any ordinary man walk through fire for a woman who had never once looked at him? She pressed her back against the far wall, both hands gripping the mahogany table's edge, knuckles white, chest heaving in short, animal gasps. The electronic lock on the conference room door had failed when the backup power relay went down a relay. She would later learn that had never been properly certified. The door was sealed. The glass panels around her were 60 millimeters of laminated, load-bearing pane, not the kind that broke when you threw a chair at it. She had already tried that. She could hear the building unraveling around her, a distant pop of superheated glass somewhere above, voices shouting, then fading, footsteps running away rather than toward. The internal radio had gone silent 20 minutes ago, and the last time someone had answered, they told her evacuation was proceeding normally. That was 17 minutes ago. Grace ran Holloway Dynamics. She had restructured the company at 29, doubled revenue by 31, and survived 2 hostile acquisition attempts before her 34th birthday. She did not panic. She did not break. But there is a difference between the kind of fear that sharpens a person and the kind that strips them down to something raw and unrecognizable. The smoke filling the room had found the seam between those two states and forced its way through. When she pressed her face to the gap at the base of the door and heard nothing but the deep moan of the building absorbing heat, something inside her simply gave way. She slid down the wall. She wept. On the other side of the building, past 2 locked fire doors and a utility corridor, most of the floor's occupants had never noticed. Vincent Hale was not running. He had been running. He had helped 3 junior employees and a woman with a mobility brace navigate the secondary stairwell down to the 38th floor. He confirmed the route to the exterior stairs was clear. He told them to keep moving and not wait for him. Then he turned around. Not because it was his job. His contract covered inspection and maintenance of the curtain wall glazing system and associated mechanical infrastructure. It did not cover re-entry into an active fire zone. He turned around because, just before the corridor behind him disappeared into gray-brown haze, he heard something, the sound of a fist or maybe an open palm striking reinforced glass. Slow and getting slower. Vincent knew this building's glass the way a surgeon knows bone. He knew which panels were laminated and which were tempered. He knew where thermal expansion would stress a frame. He had spent 11 days on this floor the previous month cataloging every bracket, every silicone bead, every drainage weep. He knew exactly which corner of the east-facing conference suite was the weakest point under heat load. He pulled the emergency glass break bar from the wall-mounted safety station, wrapped his forearm in the fire blanket from the same kit, and moved toward the sound. He hit the panel 3 times. The first blow rebounded, tearing skin across his knuckles. He registered it and moved past it. The second cracked the inner laminate. The third opened the corner. "Look at me." His voice cut through the smoke. Grace had barely registered the shape of him through the fractured glass. This man, this stranger, in a blue work shirt with a bloody hand and eyes that held no hesitation whatsoever. "If you want to live," he said, "you follow me right now." She followed him. 3 hours before the fire reached the 41st floor, Vincent Hale had parked his 12-year-old truck in the contractor lot and taken the service elevator to 39 with a toolbox and the quiet, self-sufficient energy of a man who had learned not to expect acknowledgement for the work he did. He was 36. His work shirt was old but clean. The phone in his breast pocket had a cracked screen with a home screen photo of a 7-year-old girl holding up a finger painting of what appeared to be either a dragon or a very optimistic dog. Her name was Lila. His assignment was the final sign-off inspection on the building's southeast curtain wall, the glass facade system, wrapping the upper floors. Routine. He had done dozens like it. It stopped feeling routine around 9:15 in the morning, when he found the auxiliary power distribution panel in the southeast mechanical chase. The replacement conductor cable was not rated for the load it was carrying. Someone had substituted a cheaper grade during a cost reduction push on the infrastructure upgrade. He also found that the fire door on Corridor 7C had been propped open with a rubber wedge for what the floor wear marks suggested was a considerable stretch of time. The suppression system in that corridor carried an inspection tag 8 months past its service date. He flagged all 3 items to Garrett, the facility's operations manager, a compact, impatient man who wore too many keycards and spoke in the clipped sentences of someone who had heard too many contractor complaints. "We have a $2 billion fire safety certification on this building," Garrett told him. "I don't need a glazing tech telling me about cable ratings. If the load trips in that chase," Vincent said, "and that corridor door doesn't seal, the upper floors become a trap." Garrett told him to submit the standard form. Vincent submitted it. He submitted it twice, adding photographs the second time. Then he stepped into the stairwell alcove and called Lila. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, are you almost done?" "Almost. What time does your reading start?" 7. Miss Patterson said parents have to be there by 6:45, or they don't get a seat. "I'll be there by 6:30, he said. A pause. He could hear her thinking it over, deciding whether to trust him. 7 years old and already so careful with her trust. "Okay," she said finally. "I saved you a seat in my mind. It's the good one, in the second row." He was still thinking about the seat in the second row when he passed Grace Holloway in the corridor outside the executive elevator bank. She said nothing to him. He was wearing a work shirt and carrying a clipboard. To the people who moved through these halls in tailored suits, he was infrastructure. Part of the building. Invisible in the precise way that essential things are often invisible, noticed only when they fail. But he noticed her, and he noticed, just before she turned the corner, that she walked like someone carrying considerably more than her briefcase. Grace Holloway had not slept more than 5 hours in any single night for 3 weeks. The board meeting that morning had run 2 hours over. The Callaway Group's acquisition offer was accelerating because the stock had dipped 3 points, enough for certain members to use words like vulnerability in tones that made clear they were referring to her. One member, a man named Preston who had opposed her appointment and never forgiven the company for not listening to him, had smiled across the table and spoken of the need for decisive momentum and full confidence in leadership. Leadership. Not her. The chair existed independently of whoever borrowed it. In his telling, Grace had made her face a surface nothing could adhere to. Her father had taught her that. Elliot Holloway, who had built the company from a 3-person engineering consultancy into a diversified holding group, had believed with a preacher's conviction that the person at the top could not afford to be seen feeling anything. "Emotion is information for your opponent," he used to say. "Keep it in-house." She had kept it in-house for 11 years. Before the meeting, she had received a message from the director of the Children's Memorial Fund, a nonprofit she had quietly supported for 4 years. The fund's pediatric outreach program was tied to a discretionary allocation in the Callaway merger terms, an allocation that would be eliminated if the deal restructured the giving portfolio, which it would. She had not told anyone about that. In a room where Preston was smiling, caring about a children's hospital felt like a vulnerability she could not afford. She took the private elevator to the 41st floor to call her attorney without being overheard. In the technical shaft 2 floors below, the undersized cable she had never been told about was running at 114% of its rated capacity, and the temperature inside the conduit was climbing. The fire did not announce itself. It arrived first as a smell-sharp, plastic, electrical, and then as smoke, thin at first, threading through the air-handling ducts, because the system meant to compartmentalize ventilation zones had been partially disabled during the infrastructure upgrade and never re-enabled. By the time the suppression triggers registered the heat differential in the southeast mechanical chase, the smoke had already reached 3 floors above the origin point. On floors 44 and above, a software synchronization error from a patch applied 2 weeks earlier meant the cascade notification ran 4 minutes late. 4 minutes does not sound like much until you have watched smoke move through an open fire door. The evacuation on the lower floors was orderly, more or less. Building security triaged by badge level, which meant the executive suites received escort and the support staff received announcements. People who had memorized the primary stairwell route, which was most people, because the primary stairwell was the one that existed on the laminated card in the elevator lobby, moved toward it and found it manageable. The people on floors above 40 had no way of knowing that the smoke was rising faster than the official timeline suggested, because the official timeline had been built on a system running at full suppression capacity, and the system was not running at full suppression capacity. Vincent was on 39 when the alarm sounded. He was already moving before the second tone completed, because he had spent 4 hours in this building knowing exactly where the weak points were. He helped the analysts find the secondary stairwell. He guided the woman with the mobility brace to the landing and confirmed the route down was clear. A facilities coordinator grabbed his arm as he turned back toward the upper floors. Fire response is handling it. You can't go back up there. Vincent looked at the pressure gauge on the standpipe riser below threshold. Consistent with the partially upgraded system, he looked at the smoke density in the upper corridor, thickening faster than a sealed building should allow. He did the math. It was not complicated math. From the wall kit he took the fire blanket, the glass break tool, and the half-face respirator. He pulled insulation wrap from his tool bag. Then he went back up. Inside the conference room, Grace had stopped trying to break the door. She was on the floor now, suit jacket pressed over her mouth and nose, the smoke a moving ceiling descending in inches. The room that had felt like sanctuary 40 minutes ago sealed, quiet, hers had become exactly what it was. A glass box at altitude with no workable exit. She thought, with the strange clarity that arrives when the body understands something the mind is still catching up to, that she had spent her adult life building walls around herself and calling them systems, and that she was now quite literally trapped inside one of them. She was thinking about whether anyone was coming, and arriving slowly at the conclusion that probably no one was. Then the glass moved. First a crack-running spider web from the upper corner, the exact corner, then a second impact. Then the panel opening in a spill of smoke and heat, and a man pulling himself through low and fast, one arm shielding his face. The heat when the panel gave was immediate and total, like opening an oven into your face. Vincent kept low. He crossed to her in 3 steps, stripped his outer shirt, and wrapped it around her forearms. He pressed the folded insulation into her hands and told her to breathe through it. "Can you walk?" She nodded. He was not certain he believed her, but it did not matter. The main corridor was gone. A section of ceiling tile had collapsed across the primary egress path, and the fire had moved into the northern duct system faster than he had estimated. He recalculated. The secondary glazing maintenance corridor ran along the exterior face of the building, connecting to the mechanical service platform on the west face. A path he knew existed because he had inspected it. A path that appeared on no standard evacuation map. They moved. Grace went without asking where. There was no breath to spare for questions. The maintenance corridor was narrow, maybe a meter wide, bordered on one side by structural framing, and on the other by the inner face of the exterior glass. Through it, through the reddish, heat-warped panes, the city was visible 41 floors below. Vincent felt the tremor that moved through Grace's body when she saw it. Her hand locked on his arm to the point of pain. "I can't." "You can." He did not slow. "You can hate me for this later. But if you stop moving now, you will die. So, move." She looked at him. Her face was gray and wet, and she looked at him the way a person looks at a fixed point in a storm, not with trust exactly, but with the decision to stop fighting and let something else be the anchor. She moved. He hit the second panel twice, and it gave cleanly. They came out onto the service platform on the west face just as flashlight beams swung up from below. He leaned over the railing and called down. 3 minutes later they were in a cleared stairwell, and a paramedic was pressing an oxygen mask over Grace's face. Vincent remained standing until he had confirmed she was conscious and that someone had told him so twice. Then he sat down. "My phone," he said, to whoever was nearest. "I need my phone. I have to call my daughter." Grace heard it from the stretcher. Her hand moved slightly toward him, then stopped. She watched him until they wheeled her away. By the time Grace had been stabilized and moved to a private room, the managed version of the story was already in circulation. The company's communications team had issued a statement within 90 minutes. A contained fire event, rapid coordinated response, the CEO's fortunate evacuation, thanks to the professionalism of on-site personnel. It said nothing specific about what had failed. It said nothing at all about what Vincent Hale had submitted in writing 3 days before. His name had been quietly replaced in the incident report with the phrase facilities contractor. Technically not inaccurate, practically a disappearing act. There were people inside the company who understood exactly what that language accomplished, and had chosen it deliberately. If Vincent remained a facilities contractor in the record, then the question of whether anyone had ignored his warnings would not be the first question anyone thought to ask. The story could stay a story about a fire, rather than a story about who had known the fire was possible, and had decided not to act. Vincent did not notice. He had no interest in the statement. He left the hospital at 11:30, drove home, and sat on the edge of Lila's bed while she slept, his bandaged hands resting on his knees, watching the rhythm of her breathing until it settled the rhythm of his own. In the morning, Lila came down to breakfast and looked at the gauze wrapped from his knuckles to his wrist. "Dad, that's a lot of bandage." "It is," he agreed. "Does it hurt?" "A little." She sat across from him and considered this with the seriousness she brought to most things. "I made you a card," she said. "It has a picture of your hand on it but with fewer bandages, because I wanted it to be encouraging." He ate breakfast carefully and did not cry, which took some doing. Grace, in her hospital room, was reading the communications draft she had approved while still managing the after-effects of smoke inhalation. She read it again now. The facilities, contractor language. The careful, corporate prose that transformed a preventable structural failure into a managed event and reduced the man who had carried her out of it to a generic noun. She asked her assistant to pull the incident reports from the 48 hours prior to the fire. The pause before her assistant sent them told her something. Both of Vincent's flagged reports were their photographs, timestamps. Below the first, reviewed, no immediate action required. The second had no response at all. Grace Holloway sat with that information for a long time. She had built her professional identity on the belief that systems worked when properly designed and maintained. She had believed her company's protocols were functioning because it was more comfortable than the alternative, and because she had not been the person checking the cables. She was angry in the specific, cold way that arrives, not as heat, but as clarity. She went to see him on a Thursday, 10 days after the fire. No security detail, no advance call. She stood on the sidewalk outside a 4-story brick building with a row of potted herbs on one of the windowsills, uncertain in a way she had not been in a decade. She had not told her assistant where she was going. She had not told anyone. It was the first purely private thing she had done in longer than she could accurately remember. He answered the door in a plain gray shirt and a cooking apron, a small knife in one bandaged hand and a carrot in the other. Behind him, the apartment was modest and ordered the space of a man who had not accumulated many things and had no time to let the things he had fall into disorder. At the kitchen table, Lila was doing homework with the focused intensity of a child who treated every task with equal seriousness. She looked up when Grace entered and went back to her work. Vincent made coffee. Grace sat across from him and told him she had read the reports. He nodded. She told him she was sorry no one had acted on them,